Paris, the morning of March 12, 1932. In an elegant apartment near the Champs-Élysées, the richest man most people have never heard of lies down on his bed, unbuttons his pinstriped vest, and shoots himself through the heart. On the desk, 3 sealed letters and a pistol receipt from a gun shop around the corner, dated the day before. He wrote one of the letters to a friend. It says simply, "I have made such a mess of things that I believe this to be the most satisfactory solution." The man's name is Ivar Kreuger. He controls 200 companies. He produces 3 out of every 4 matches struck anywhere on Earth. He has personally loaned money to France, to Germany, to more than a dozen sovereign nations, some so large they stabilized entire currencies. When the news of his death reaches the markets, they hold it back for hours. They stop the tickers in Stockholm, because governments understand what is about to happen. When it finally breaks, fortunes across 2 continents simply evaporate, because Ivar Kreuger's empire, the banks, the bonds, the balance sheets certified by the most respected men in finance, is a shell. Behind it sits a hole of $250 million, and forged Italian government bonds he drew by hand at his own desk, practicing the signatures like a schoolboy. Charles Ponzi fooled dishwashers and dockworkers. Ivar Kreuger fooled the smartest money in the world. This is how he did it. Ivar Kreuger is born in 1880 in Kalmar, a quiet port town on Sweden's Baltic coast, into a family that owns 2 small match factories. He is brilliant, cold, and impatient. He finishes his engineering degrees at 20, 2 of them, and immediately leaves Sweden because Sweden is too small for what he has in mind. For 7 years he wanders the world as a construction engineer. New York, Chicago, South Africa, Mexico. He works on some of the tallest new buildings in America and learns 2 things. First, modern engineering, steel, concrete, precision. Second, and more valuable, Americans will give enormous sums of money to a man who projects certainty. In 1908, he comes home and founds a construction firm, Kreuger & Toll. He introduces something Sweden has never seen: the fixed deadline with a penalty clause. Finish late, he pays you. Finish early, you pay him a bonus. It's a sensation. Kreuger & Toll builds fast, builds famous, Stockholm's stadium, its city hall foundations, and Ivar becomes the young king of Swedish concrete. But construction is slow money, and Ivar Kreuger has no patience for slow money. His eye falls on the family business, on the humble match. Understand what a match is in 1913. It is how the world makes fire. Every stove, every lamp, every cigarette on the planet begins with a match. It costs almost nothing to make. Everyone on Earth buys it constantly, and Sweden, sitting on forests of aspen wood, makes the best ones in the world. Kreuger consolidates. He merges his family's factories with rivals, cuts costs, buys out the competition, and by 1917 he has rolled the entire industry into one company, Swedish Match. He now controls a country's worth of fire. Most men would stop there. Kreuger looks at the map and sees something no one else sees. If one company could own the matches of every country, a global monopoly on fire itself, that company could print money forever. The only question is how you convince sovereign nations to hand you a monopoly. And in the ruins of the First World War, he finds the answer. Europe 1919. The war is over and the continent is broke. Governments need cash desperately to rebuild, to pay debts, to stop their currencies from collapsing. The traditional lenders, the great banks of London, are exhausted. The Americans have money but no idea whom to trust. Kreuger steps into that vacuum with the most audacious business model of the century. He will lend governments the money himself, tens of millions of dollars at generous rates. And in exchange, the government grants Swedish Match the national match monopoly. Poland, Peru, Ecuador, Hungary, Greece, Yugoslavia, Romania. One by one, nations sign. The crown jewel comes in 1927. France herself borrows $75 million from a private Swedish businessman. Then Germany, $125 million. Money that helps Germany pay war reparations. A single company, run by a single silent Swede, is functioning as the lender of last resort to the nations of Europe. The world falls at his feet. Time magazine puts him on the cover. Presidents receive him. Herbert Hoover consults him on economics. The press calls him the Match King, the savior of Europe. He is compared to J.P. Morgan, except Morgan never lent to half a continent. But here is the question nobody asks loudly enough. Where does a Swedish matchmaker get hundreds of millions of dollars to lend to France? The answer is America. Kreuger discovers that the roaring 20s stock market will buy anything with his name on it. Through his American partners, Lee, Higginson and Company, one of the oldest, most respected banks in Boston, he sells securities to ordinary American investors by the hundreds of millions. And those securities pay magnificent dividends, 25% year after year. Except the dividends aren't coming from profits. Match sales are good, but nowhere near good enough to pay 25% forever. Kreuger is paying old investors with new investors' money. Hear that sentence again. Old investors paid with new investors' money. It's Ponzi, wearing a better suit, speaking 5 languages, holding a portfolio of sovereign nations. The machine hides inside complexity. 200 interlocking companies in a dozen countries. Subsidiaries auditing each other. Special shares with 1/1000th of a vote, so the public holds the risk, and Ivar holds the power. Accounts kept in his head, and only in his head. His 3 rules for success, he tells an interviewer, are silence, more silence, and still more silence. And the auditors? The bankers? The finest financial minds of Boston and Stockholm? They see the dividends arrive on time, they see kings and finance ministers shaking his hand, and they decide that checking the books would be almost insulting. One of his own accountants later put it perfectly. The figures were whatever Ivar said they were. October 1929. The American stock market, the boiler that feeds Kreuger's entire machine, explodes. Remember what the machine needs to live, a constant flow of new money in. But now there is no new money anywhere on Earth. Credit freezes. Investors stop buying. And Kreuger has sovereign loan payments due, real money, owed to real governments, on schedules he signed with his own hand. Watch what a cornered genius does. He doesn't run. He doubles. He announces new loans to new countries, bigger headlines, bigger promises, because confidence is the only fuel he has left. He borrows from one pocket to fill another. He pledges the same assets to multiple banks. The savior of Europe begins writing checks against countries' trust itself. And then, in a locked room, Ivar Kreuger does the thing that separates the desperate financier from the criminal forever. He forges Italian government bonds. 42 of them, face value around $140 million. He has the blank forms printed, and then, this detail should stay with you, he fills in the signatures of Italian officials himself, by hand at his desk, practicing each signature on scrap paper first. The head of one of the world's great financial empires, hunched over like a teenager forging a report card. He misspells one of the names. The bonds go into the vaults as collateral, and for a few months, the machine wheezes on. But by early 1932, the banks want their money, the auditors finally want the books, and a meeting is called in Paris where Kreuger will be asked, at last, direct questions with numbers in them. He buys the pistol on March 11th. He uses it on March 12th, hours before the meeting. The Match King is dead at 52. And now the world gets to open the books. It takes the accountants of Price Waterhouse months to untangle what Ivar Kreuger built. And what they find rewrites financial history. Roughly $250 million simply does not exist. Assets invented, profits imagined. The greatest audit failure the world had ever seen. His company's paper is suddenly worth a fraction of face value. And it is everywhere. In Swedish pension funds, in Boston trust accounts, in the savings of ordinary Americans who had been told this was the safest paper in the world. Lee, Higginson and Company, 150 years old, the bank that survived every panic since before the Civil War, is destroyed. Sweden's prime minister falls. Investors across 2 continents are wiped out. In the depths of the Depression, Kreuger becomes a word spat, not spoken. But the most important consequence is written in law. The Kreuger collapse lands in Washington in the same season as the Senate's hearings into Wall Street, and it becomes the case study that finally forces reform. Within 2 years, America requires public companies to publish independently audited accounts, and creates the Securities and Exchange Commission to watch them. The rules that govern every stock you can buy today were written in part because of one Swede with a pistol in Paris. Here's the uncomfortable part. Charles Ponzi built nothing. His scheme was a naked pyramid from day one. Kreuger built things. Real factories, real monopolies, real loans that genuinely stabilized European currencies. Serious historians still argue about him. Was he a fraud who used an empire as camouflage, or an empire builder who turned to fraud when the world's money ran out? And that is exactly what made him lethal. Nobody smart gives their savings to a dishwasher with a miracle. But a man with 200 companies, a time cover, and France in his debt. The smartest money on earth lined up, because the surest way to fool an expert is to be almost real. 40,000 people trusted Ponzi with millions. Millions of people trusted Kreuger with billions. The scheme was the same. The only difference was the quality of the suit, the playbook. What Ivar Kreuger adds to the manual: Rule 1, the best camouflage is real success. Build something genuine first, then no one checks what's behind it. Rule 2, complexity is a weapon. 200 companies auditing each other isn't structure. It's fog. Rule 3, pay dividends loudly. Borrow quietly. The applause covers the sound of digging. The paper empire ledger, the running count of every dollar stolen in this series, now stands at roughly 265 million. It will grow, because money was never paper. It's belief wearing paper's clothes. Next time on Paper Empire, a man who never built anything at all, he just talked. He sold the Eiffel Tower for scrap to a Paris junk dealer. Then he came back and sold it again. And when Al Capone handed him $50,000, he found a way to con the most dangerous man in America. Politely. The count is coming. Subscribe.